Welcome to Just Energy Radio with your host, naturopath and medical intuitive, Dr. Rita Louise. We have learned from Einstein's theory that matter and energy are one. Physicists believe that all systems in nature have their own particular way of vibrating. From the swinging of a pendulum to the waves of the ocean to the light that brightens the sky each day, each of these oscillates at its own unique rate. The same holds true for every thought, feeling, event, or word we speak. Each has its own frequency or rate of vibration. What many of us don't realize is when we take everything in our universe down to its simplest form, it is all just energy. Join Dr. Rita Louise on a journey through time and space where past, present, and future collide. Today, what you believe may be called into question. What we want to know is, who made up the rules? Be brave and step outside the box. We are about to turn our world upside down and venture into the unknown. Hold on. We are departing our own beliefs and entering alternative realms. Enjoy the possibilities.
Hello and welcome to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for tuning into the show today. Oh my God, we have a great show. We have Scott Wolter from America Unearthed joining us to talk about all of the out-of-place artifacts in America, and especially the Kensington Runestone that has one of those weird hooked X's on it. But don't forget, Just Energy Radio is brought to you by soulhealer.com and the Institute of Applied Energetics, where you too can learn to become a medical intuitive counselor, or energy medicine practitioner. So if you've missed an episode of Just Energy Radio, you can check out all of our shows on the Just Energy Radio website. That's www.justenergyradio.com. And while you're there, sign up for our weekly newsletter to be kept informed of all of the upcoming episodes of the show. Or you can also check us out on YouTube, on Just Energy Radio on YouTube. Or you can come to the Inception Radio Network webpage, check it out there, or download their little app for your smartphone. There are so many ways that you can keep up with all of the exciting programming we have on the show. Next weekend, I'll be in El Reno. I can never remember that name. El Reno, Oklahoma, at the Paranormal Times Paracon. And then, let's see, in November or October, I'll be at my favorite event, the History, Haunts, and Legends Conference in spooky Jefferson, Texas. So please do come and check out those events if you are in the Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana areas. Anyway, so let me tell you a little bit about our guest and get him on the air. Forensic geologist Scott Wolter is the host of History's H2 channel hit show America Unearthed. Scott is also the author of several books, including The Hooked X, Key to the Secret History of North America, which covers the story of his continued research and resulting discoveries made over the last 12 years, including his ongoing quest to uncover the mysteries of the controversial Kensington Runestone. So from thehookedx.com, Scott Wolter. Hey, Scott, how are you?
I'm doing just great, Dr. Rita. Thanks for having me on tonight.
Well, thanks for taking time out of your busy day and coming on. So,
yeah. Well, this is great. I'm looking forward to it.
So, by way of introduction, what got you interested in exploring ancient mysteries, and in particular, ancient mysteries in America?
Well, it really started with the Kensington Runestone. There was no plan to pursue this for sure. I mean, it just evolved and happened on its own. But I was minding my business, running my business, which is a materials forensic laboratory, basically doing autopsies on concrete and rock, doing forensic work on concrete and rock problems, if you will, low strength, cracking, scaling, peeling, failures, that kind of thing. And I was approached by the Runestone Museum back in 2000 to do this analysis on the Kensington Runestone, which at the time I never heard of it. I didn't know what it was, and didn't really think it was that much more interesting than some of the other projects that I work on. But anyway, so the question they wanted to have answered was, is it old or not? In other words, is the weathering of the inscription old or is it modern, consistent with the hoax? And I ended up doing a tombstone study that demonstrated that the weathering of the inscription was very old and made a late 19th century hoax that everybody claimed impossible. So logic told me, as it would anybody, if it's not a modern hoax, you really only have one thing that's left, and it must be genuine. And so I wrote my report and basically said that, thinking that, boy, these people will be happy, and, well, they got one. Good for them. And the reaction from the work was puzzling at first, and then it made me angry, because people were questioning my conclusion, not by saying, okay, here's a question we have about this, we have a question about that. They just roundly dismissed it. And that is just something I wasn't used to. I don't mind if people want to address the specific points, but if they just dismiss it for no apparent reason, that's what bothered me. Anyway, that's what really got the ball started, and I found out that there was apparently some paradigm in history that nobody was here before Columbus, which I didn't know that was the rule, and I broke the rule, apparently. So I started to investigate, why are these people questioning me, and it opened the door to a multitude of very puzzling things that are going on within various academic avenues, and I found out that there was a whole host of artifacts that were questionable that I thought we could provide some help on, and so I started looking at those and realized that there were a number of things out here that had been dismissed that were absolutely genuine. I also found some fakes or things that were not old, but by and large, there's a whole host of things that are genuine, that really tell a different story of the history of the United States of America, or North America. And it evolved into this show, and here we are.
What I find interesting in hearing your story is that you didn't come into this area as a history person or ancient mystery person or someone that came from that angle. I mean, you came from industry and kind of got sucked into it. And so it doesn't seem like you really even have an agenda to prove yourself right. I mean, maybe now you do, but at the time when you were analyzing the Kensington Runestone, it was like you were just doing your job.
Well, that's exactly what I was doing, and I've said that many times. I was doing my job. And, in my business of doing this in the professional world, and I think that's a very important point when it comes down to people saying, well, why are you having, such trouble with many other people? Well, the reason is we're talking about the professional world versus the academic world, and we do things totally differently. I have to be able to defend the work that I do in a court of law under oath. And, if I do my job poorly or incompetently or unethically, I can lose my license to practice, I can lose my job, and in some extreme cases go to jail. So I don't think the academic world is held to the same standard. And I'm sure of this. And so this is one of the problems that we run into. And, you talk about wanting to be proven right. Well, I think everybody wants to do a good job. And when they write a report or they write a thesis on something that they've worked on, of course they want to be right. But at the end of the day, you have to have the evidence to support whatever argument you're making. And again, in my case, I have to be able to defend it in a court of law. So I don't say or write anything unless I feel I can do that. And I've testified many times in a court of law. I was hired again today. I'll be doing a deposition for a case here very soon. And, I know what to do. And if I have a customer who's, did something that caused something to fail, I'm not going to try to get them out of it. I'm going to tell them, look, the evidence isn't in your favor. You better settle. You sure as hell don't want to get me on a witness stand, because I'm not going to lie for you or for anybody. Mm-hmm. And that's the way it works.
When you were doing the analysis on the Kensington Runestone, I mean, obviously you cannot physically date the rock. So what were you analyzing that you were able to come up with some kind of a dating for it?
Right. Well, I mean, first of all, the question of the date becomes self-evident once you claim that it's, once you say, well, this is a genuine artifact, because it's self-dated. It says twice, 1362. So you can date it, but the work that we did not date it to 1362. What we did is what I call relative age dating. And what I looked at was a key mineral on the surface of the stone called biotite. Actually, there are 4 different mica minerals, biotite being one of them, but I focused on biotite because it's a species of mica that has iron in it that weathers the fastest of all the others. I didn't want anyone to accuse me of cooking the experiment by picking the mica that weathers the slowest. And I compared it with the weathering of the same mineral under the same environmental conditions, same mineral grain size, because different sized minerals weather at different rates, and with tombstones, which was about as perfect a comparison for the conditions that the Kensington Runestone existed in, just under the ground, just barely under the ground. In fact, one end of it was sticking out of the ground. And what I concluded by dating tombstones back on the East Coast that went back to the Revolutionary War period, that the age was at least 200 years. And the reason I say at least is because on the tombstones, the mica minerals, the biotites, began to come off the surface from mechanical weathering, wetting and drying and freezing and thawing, both above and below grade, at about 200 years. But on the Kensington Runestone inscription, all the micas are gone. They're not beginning to fall off, they're gone. So my conclusion is that the weathering was older than that. And that's all I can say, but that's from 1898 when it was pulled out of the ground, because it hasn't been in a weathering environment since. So that makes a late 19th century hoax impossible. That pushes it back to the late 1600s. Well, there weren't any Europeans here in the late 1600s. So really, the most parsimonious or plausible explanation is it has to be genuine.
So do you think that stone was actually propped up kind of like a tombstone at one point in time, or do you think it was intentionally buried?
I think it was intentionally buried for a lot of reasons, but most notably, who's going to read it? I mean, why would they prop it up? For who to read? The natives? The natives couldn't read runes, so there really was no reason to do that, and there was every reason to bury it, because we also found a triangulation of stone holes in the immediate vicinity that all intersected directly where the stone was, which meant that they buried it knowing that they had a method to try to find it again, which logic would tell you they had to do that, because the stone is a land claim. And the only way, I mean, this is what people have been doing forever, burying land claim stones to prove that they were there. That's what it is. I mean, to me, it's quite simple.
Okay. I mean, because we're going to get into the hooked X part later, but this is fascinating. So I'm just going to keep going. So what is the stone, based on, best evidence available, I mean, what does the stone actually say? You gave a date, 1369.
Well, I can tell you what it says. I can read it to you, but I can tell you by heart. On the there's 2 sides of the stone that are inscribed. The face side, which is natural, glacial age surface, and then the split side, which the stone, whoever carved it, took a larger slab of flat glacial gray wacky stone, and they split it down to a very interesting 2-to-1 ratio. Actually, it's the golden ratio, 1 to 1.62, but that gets into some other things. But and there's 3 lines on the split side. But basically it says 8 Guter, which are basically people that live in the southern Baltic region of Scandinavia, and 22 Norman. And for a long time that's been translated as Norwegians, but I'm beginning to think it means Norman, from as in Norman French, as in Normans. And it says 8 Goths and 22 Norwegians, or Norman, on this acquisition business or taking up land far to the west of Vinland. We had camped near 2 shelters, 1 day's journey north from the stone. We were fishing one day. When we came home, found 10 men red with blood and death, and then 3 Latin letters, AVM. Then the last line says, save from evils. On the split side, the last 3 lines, it says, there are 10 men by the sea with our ships, 14 days' journey from this island, year 1362. How about that?
That's pretty journal entry-like to me.
Well, it is, but on the other hand, based on who I'm convinced created this, well, first of all, I know there's more going on with this inscription that appears to be on its face. Mm-hmm. There are codes embedded within it. There's double dating, and who knows what else. I think a lot of the inscription is probably allegory and code, and I don't know if it would be a good idea to take it just as it reads. I think there's more to it. Possibly the message is nonsense, and you have to read it a different way. I've had people make suggestions to me, some that I think make sense, some that don't make sense, but I do think that there's more to it than meets the eye.
Has anyone ever looked for the dead bodies in that area? Or is, because the stone is a hoax, then there's just not any interest in following up the potential leads that are on it?
Well, that's true, but, again, you have to be careful. I mean, many people assumed for decades, well, the natives killed 10 of their party. Well, it doesn't say that. All it says is 10 men red with blood and death. And by the way, red with blood and death is how people stricken with plague were often described in
Well, that
Europe.
was kind of what I was thinking.
Well, yeah. And, the other thing I think people forget is that the plague was a worldwide phenomenon. It wasn't just in Europe. The reason we think of Europe is because that's where the majority of the educated people who are writing it down wrote it down. And so I think sometimes we forget that this thing traveled around the world. And for the most part, we don't know what the heck happened here because the natives didn't write this down. However, in talking to some of the story keepers in various native tribes that I have, they talk about the disease that killed, in some cases, half the population. So I think that could be what killed the 10 men. So if they died, regardless of how they died, their bodies should be someplace. And but if there was some type of a conflict, or if it was plague and people were dying, it doesn't mean that it happened right there. Maybe they got out of wherever they were, buried the 10 men wherever that place was, and carved the stone at some point down the road, maybe days, weeks, or months later. I mean, we just don't know. So the point is this, is that a lack of evidence proves nothing. I mean, the lack of bodies doesn't mean that the runestone's fake. It's irrelevant to that question.
Good point. So I'm going to switch gears here because we have a question in the chat room, and then we'll...
Sure.
Okay, and so this is from American Road Warrior, and it says, can you ask him how long he thinks modern concrete will last before it erodes, and is there any evidence of ancient concrete?
Well, that's an interesting question. And it's not an easy answer. However, if everything is done right with concrete, and I guess the first thing I would say is, are we talking about interior concrete or concrete exposed to the elements? And if elements, is it in a freeze-thaw environment? And if it is, if it has a low water content, it's properly air and trained, they finished it properly, and they cured it properly, you're talking about concrete that will be durable for 50 to 60 years. If it's interior concrete and it's never exposed to the elements and everything is done right, modern concrete today, who knows? It could last for hundreds of years under the right conditions. Is there ancient concrete? Yes, there is. I mean, the Romans worked with a lime and added volcanic ash to it, which is the silica component that makes something closer to modern concrete that is very strong, much stronger than just plain lime mortar. And some of that, again, under the right conditions, still exists going back from Roman times.
Okay. Yeah,
How
I think
about
I think it's interesting that modern concrete will last for 50 or 60 years, but we have Roman concrete that's 2,000 years old and is still going.
Well, that concrete, though, isn't exposed to moisture and freezing conditions. We're talking about in the Mediterranean region, a freeze-thaw plays havoc with concrete. I'm telling you, it's a killer, because the one thing about concrete, this is the universal rule of concrete. In compression, it's very strong, but in tension, it's weak. So if you can figure out a way to push it apart, it won't do very well, and that's exactly what frost does. It puts it in tension. It gets inside, it freezes and expands, and it just can't handle it. So the weather means everything. It has everything to do with it.
Okay. Next thing you know, we're going to have people. Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. The image I was kind of getting is you see these giant rocks and it has the little, the roots from the tree starting to grow in, and then the rock splits. I mean, same kind of idea. So. Well,
that's the same thing. It's putting that little crack in tension, and once that crack is formed, a child could pull the rock apart. I mean, it's amazing how that works. The physical properties of rock mechanics. It's really interesting.
I guess that's why they built with real rocks back in the day, because they didn't break so easy.
That's right. They knew what they were doing, and they knew how to work it. They worked the sedimentary planes, the joint fractures, and they were masters at working with the rock and getting it to do what they wanted it to do. It's really an incredible skill.
One that we have totally lost today.
Oh, I wouldn't say that. There are some pretty skilled stonemasons that are out there. But it's different today for sure. There's not as many, and it's looked upon differently in our world today. You have to remember something. The people that had a trade like that, especially the stonemasons that were working on the great cathedrals or churches, they were kind of the rock stars of their day, because everybody looked to these houses of worship as the pillars of their society, and anybody who had a skill to be able to create them, especially the amazing Gothic cathedrals. I mean, you were the deal, And the other thing is, most people never traveled beyond the cities or towns that they lived in. But these guys had a skill that was in demand, and so they were able to travel. And it was a pretty good gig back in those days. They were, they had it pretty good.
They were rock stars, literally.
I was going to say that, but I just thought that's too cheesy.
Nah. We get cheesy on this show.
No, I'm kidding you.
Okay, shifting gears again. I want to spend a little time talking about your show, America Unearthed. But what's it like traveling around the country, bringing ancient mysteries to light that most of us, we think if we're going to find some ancient mystery, we need to go to Egypt or China or something. So what is that like, finding all this really weird old stuff here?
Well, I'll be lying if I said it wasn't amazing. I really feel privileged to be able to do this. It's great, and just to be able to go see these places, to meet some of these incredible people, and spend time with them, and go to these sites, and the crew that we travel with is fantastic. They're a really talented group of young people that are into the subject matter. I mean, not all of them love it like I do, but they really try to understand it, and so I think that helps them do their job better. I know it does. And they're fun to travel with. They're good at what they do, and I'm just really thrilled to be able to do this. And so I I feel like I've got the world by the tail. It's really great.
Have you been surprised by the kinds of stories that people have brought to you? I mean, to me, the Kensington Runestone I've known about for a long time, but I mean, I've watched your show, and some of these things that you come up with, I'm like, where the heck did he find this stuff?
Where the heck did that come from, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes I am blown away. But, there's another part of me that knew that there was a lot of stuff out there. And the one nice thing about the show is we can reach a lot of people, and we ask for people to come forward if they have something, some type of mystery or puzzling thing going on. Now, not everything is interesting. A lot of people will send us rocks, and they'll say, hey, that's a petrified lizard head. And I'll get back to them and say, no, it's not. It's just a natural formed rock that looks like a petrified lizard head, but it's not. And I swear some of the things that people send me look exactly like what they think it does, but it's not. It's natural. But, nature can do some amazing things, as we all know. And one of the things I've heard someone say that's absolutely not true is that nature doesn't make straight lines. Absolutely, she does, and she does it in rocks all the time. And many times these rocks will fool people. I can't tell you how many rocks I've received that were X's, and people swore that up and down, somebody carved this in here, and it's totally natural.
Okay. You mentioned people coming forward with leads. It seems like on the shows that some of the people that you end up talking to, and I'm sure that, who you film is not everybody, but this is just a secret between you and I. But, I mean, how hard is it to come up with leads or to get these people to talk? I mean, because they just, I don't know. I'm not even sure how to politically correctly ask the question.
Wait, where do we get these people, or what?
Yeah,
I'm not sure what you're asking.
Yeah, kinda.
Well, you know what? I mean, yes, I guess it depends on the story, and if somebody has done significant research on a particular artifact, we'll contact them, whether they're an academic, whether they're a professional like me, or whether they're just somebody who has a strong interest with no particular education in that field. And I don't think that just because a person doesn't have a PhD or even a master's or even a college degree, that it matters, that they can't have something to offer or even be the premier expert on a particular subject. You brought up the fact that, well, you're not even a historian. Well, what does it take to become a historian? Read, right? Mm-hmm. Go visit these places. Go see these things. Learn as much as you can about whatever it is that you're investigating, right? Isn't that what a historian does? Well, I can do that. I have done that. And it was kind of funny because when I wrote this book on the Kensington Runestone, I don't know if you know about it, it's Kensington Runestone, Compelling New Evidence. I co-authored it with a linguist, and I did a lot of historical research for 2.5 years. I basically lived at the Minnesota Historical Society. I found 1,000 pages, roughly 1,000 pages of documents directly related to the runestone that nobody had ever read. And the reason I know that is because the rice paper pages were tearing and falling apart as I was pulling them apart. They hadn't been read since the day they were written.
Wow.
And the former director of the Minnesota Historical Society, Russell Fridley, who died a couple of years ago, he and I became great friends. And if you ask people in Minnesota, they would say, how could you even talk to that man? He's the absolute enemy of the Kensington Runestone. And he was. He was the singular voice against its authenticity. But Russ and I were great personal friends. And the one thing I'll say about Russ is he would listen to me when I would come forward with new evidence, and he would ask questions, and we went back and forth for years, probably for about 6-7 years. And at one point, Russ admitted, he said, well, you've convinced me that Olaf Ullman didn't carve the Kensington Runestone. But he said, I'm not convinced yet that it's genuine, but I don't think Olaf Ullman did it. And that in itself is amazing. I mean,
It's
this is
huge.
the guy, right? And at one point, we were sitting around, and he said to me when I gave him the Runestone book after he read it, he said, Scott, if you were one of my students, he said, you've done more than enough to earn a PhD in history on this topic alone. And I thought that was really cool because this is a guy who for 33 years was the director of the Minnesota Historical Society. So anyway, it was, this whole thing about, who's qualified, who's not qualified to investigate this. Well, the bottom line is it doesn't matter what you have behind your name. If you have the evidence, you've got the goods, and you can support your argument, have at it.
So all of you amateur archaeologists out there, send your samples to Scott.
Listen, we've had everything. We've had people, what's really fun is we've had some of the people that have written into our show, we've had them on the show. We said, I've gone up to them and said, show me what you got. What did you find? What do you think it is? Why do you think that? And in a couple of cases, these people did some really, really good stuff. So anybody can contribute to this. This isn't limited to the academics or the historians. I think if people do good work, it should be acknowledged.
Cool. And I think with the stuff that is in America, people really aren't going to talk about it because it's not supposed to be here, so why bring it up? The whole believability factor.
Well, that's a great point. And I'll go back and tell you the runestone. The negative reaction to the runestone, with really no basis other than, well, we've never seen anything like this before. Excuse me. So it has to be a fake. Well, what kind of an argument is that? But what it did is it created this environment where people in the community were afraid to come forward because of the way that Olaf Ullman and his family were treated. They were tried and convicted by academics who, quite frankly, didn't know what the hell they were talking about. And there were people in the community that if they found something, I've heard stories where they said, look, I found this, and I threw it down a well. I didn't want to be treated like Olaf Ullman. And,
wow.
These are some of the lessons that we need to learn from so that it doesn't happen again. And when we have this pervasive attitude in our country and indeed around the world that nobody was here before Chris, I mean, it's nonsense. And it's really, I think, done more harm than good. And it to me, it's blatantly dishonest for many of these academics to sit here and claim some of the things that they say when they have no basis for it. And they've created this environment where people feel like they can't come forward, otherwise they'll be criticized or ridiculed, and it's got to stop, and it needs to change.
I think that mentality is starting to change. Thank God. Starting.
I agree, and it is time. It's long past time. And you know what? Why don't these guys get on board? The first academic, the first runologist to pull his head out of his rear end and look at the Kensington Runestone and realize this is the Rosetta Stone of our continent, is going to make a big name for himself. So why don't they get off the schneid and get to work? I'll tell you what the problem is. The problem is that they have this database, this record of thousands of runic inscriptions over in Scandinavia. I know this because I've been there 6 times. I've seen hundreds of these runic inscriptions myself. And basically what they do is they say, okay, this is the box of knowledge that we know. And then the runestone comes along and they go, okay, let's see, we take this thing, well, it doesn't fit in our box, therefore it can't be right. That's exactly what they did. What they don't understand is this thing is not your box. It isn't part of your box. This was created by a monastic military order that's filled with codes and allegories and symbols, and until you understand what you're dealing with, you have no chance to figure it out. That's what's going on with the runestone.
But it's not even just runestone. It totally makes sense, but it's not even just runestones. It's stuff that they find in Egypt. It's stuff that they find in South America. It's stuff that they find everywhere. It's like, it doesn't really fit. You know, those giant skulls. What giant skulls? Oh, those invisible, disappearing giant skulls that no one's seen in, 75 years? Those ones?
You mean the ones that you buried in the archives? Because, well, you know what, Dr. Rita, I think that there's some bigger issues going on here. And, call me a conspiracy theorist if you want. But I really believe that this all goes back to manifest destiny in this country. And what I mean by that is that there were a couple of tenets in that doctrine that basically set the precedent for what we're dealing with today. One is that the Native Americans are savages, right? Not Christian. And therefore, it's okay to persecute them because we got to get rid of them, and, we want this land. The other thing is there was nobody here prior to us. So this is virgin land, free for the taking, right? And that's basically what the two main tenets were. But let me ask you this. What do you think would happen along the way when they found a Kensington Runestone or a Bat Creek stone or something that told them somebody from the other side of the pond was here before us? Well, what does that do to manifest destiny?
But even with the American Indians, if they take the point away from Christopher Columbus and the whole European regime, then you run into these giant land claim issues. And, well maybe we're going to take all our land back. Ha, 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 ha.
Well, that's right. What if they realize that one of these other stones that probably disappeared into the archives or was destroyed or who knows what, was a land claim and they recognize it? What does that do to manifest destiny? It complicates it at the very least. So what's the simplest thing to do? Make it go away. And I'm absolutely convinced that's what happened to many things. In fact, I think Lewis and Clark and Thomas Jefferson and our founding fathers knew all about things like the Kensington Runestone. And that's part of what their mission was. Zebulon Pike and some of the other guys that were sent out at the same time that we don't know as much about because they didn't get the press that Lewis and Clark did. I'm absolutely convinced that they were told that there will be things out there you need to look for, not just blonde-haired, blue-eyed Indians, but some of these land claim stones. And, I know they knew about them. I'm absolutely convinced. And so, this was the problem. And, they had a story. They had we see parallels to that today when we justify wars or whatever it is that we want to do. But that's what I think happened. And now, do they seriously think somebody's going to come along from Scandinavia and try to exercise the land claim that the runestone is? Good luck with that, right?
Yeah.
So let's stop kidding around and fooling around, and let's get after it.
All right, back to the show. So, of all the places that you have gone, what has been the coolest, neatest, or most mysterious location or item or whatever? Pick your favorite.
All right. Well, my favorite episode was the Hooked X, obviously, because that's my stuff. But I would have to say Chichen Itza in Mexico was incredible. It just for amazing stone structures, the detailed carvings, the history there. I mean, I was blown away. It was just amazing. I was running around there like a little kid. It was so fun. The most mysterious thing, as far as just being sort of creeped out, would probably have to be the underground chamber that we did an episode on. But one of the most interesting mysteries that I definitely would like to do a follow-up on, and actually would like to do more scientific work on, is the Dare Stones of the Roanoke colony. I think the majority of those stones are absolutely genuine, and I think that there's an incredible story about the survival of Eleanor Dare, who, according to the Stones, married a native chief, had a son with him, after her own son or her own daughter and husband were killed. I mean, think about that. What an amazing story that is. You talk about a made-for-Hollywood movie. There's one right there. Start writing the script. But I would like to follow up on those stones. I'd like to go to the places where they were found to see if the geology matches the geology of the stones that I saw. And, the weathering environments and all that. I think I could add a lot to that. So that's a cool story. I'd have to say that's one of the coolest stories that we did the first season.
Well, maybe the listeners know some information. And so that's your assignment, America. Go dig up some information. I mean, don't dig it up. Dig it up. Just,
well,
collect
that's a good point. Don't collect something. I mean, if you think you have a site or a burial, by all means, don't do anything. Because even though I bang heads with the archaeologists, I've had many people say, well, what about the axe heads that were found, the Norwegian axe heads that, could prove the Kensington Runestone? I said, well, you know what, I'd love that to be real, but once you take it out of the ground and it's out of context, I agree with the archaeologists, you can't do anything with it. It's not that we're calling you a liar or we don't believe you. It's just that once it's out of context, we can't do anything with it. And maybe it was dropped there by, Sven, who came over, and this is a family heirloom. It's absolutely a legitimate axe, but it didn't come over here at the time it was, it was made. So that's why I tell people, if you think you have something, make sure that, if anything comes out of the ground, it has to be done by a qualified person, or really you might as well throw it in the garbage for all intents and purposes. It's nothing you can do with it.
Contaminated. Okay, we have another
I hate
question.
That, but it's true.
But it's true. We have another question from the chat room, and this is from Lisa. And the question is, has Scott seen any of the supposed Egyptian carvings that the Mormons and others found as they traveled across the U.S.? Supposedly there are some in the Grand Canyon area, but off limits to tourists.
I can't answer that question on the grounds it might incriminate my season 2.
Okay. All right. So let me ask you this
Lisa
question.
can read between the lines on that one.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this question. So when does season 2 come out this fall?
Yeah, I don't know the date yet, but it starts sometime around Thanksgiving. And I can tell you that I have been in the Grand Canyon. I know what she's talking about, and that's some damn cool stuff.
All right, boy, usually the chat room doesn't have so many questions, but I think they're really liking you. Okay, another question. I mean, I have my whole list. You guys
fun. Bring it on. Let's go.
Okay. Has he ever taken a look at the Hefner Runestone? Written in the Elder
Futhark.
Well, you know what it is. It's like, I'm not even going to try to say these words. Yeah, that thing.
Yes, I've written about it in my runestone book. And I really can't say too much about the Hefner Runestone on the grounds that it might incriminate my season 2.
All right, we're just going to go back to my questions. How's that?
I'm such a jerk. I'm sorry, whoever asked that question. But I will say this, okay? I went down there, oh God, I guess it's 10 years ago or 8 years ago, 9 years ago. It's got to be close to 10 years ago. I met Gloria Farley, who was the champion of the Hefner Runestone, and she was one determined, incredible lady. And I did quite a bit of work on the Hefner stone. I was able to collect a sample from up on the side, and I can tell you that I think, based on what I saw from that sample, if I was able to take a small sample from one of those runes, I think I could answer that question.
But not on air, and not until after season 2. Okay.
Did I say that?
No, I said that. I said that for you.
Okay. Anyway, that inscription is really something.
Well, okay. So when you do these shows, I mean, are there ever things that you are told, like by the network or the powers that be or whoever you want to attribute it to, that you can't disclose?
You mean has at there all, been, or just before I'm told,
that ends up being censored, from or cut out. Like there's some really interesting piece of information. It's like, oh, it hit the cutting room floor. Oops.
I'm not totally sure I understand your question, but let me just say this. I'm not supposed to, talk too much about the episodes that we're working on or the ones that haven't aired. I can talk in general about them, but, I can't tell you, like, for example, the Tucson lead artifacts. We've already done that episode. It's already aired. Those things are incredible. They're genuine, and I cannot believe that the academic world screwed that one up. Oh my gosh, are you kidding me? I mean, that was such a bad mess up. I can't even believe it. It was so poorly handled. But that one's aired, absolutely genuine, and I want to revisit those too because there are some incredible things going on that we didn't talk about. We didn't hardly say anything about what they said. So that we need to do more work there. Are there things that we worked on that they basically said, hey, you can't talk about this?
Yeah, that's my question.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Not really. Cool. Because if you haven't figured it out yet, it's pretty hard to shut me up. So, no, I'm serious. I'm not even kidding.
Actually, you're not too bad, okay? You're pretty good. We were having like a good conversation, so this is all good.
Okay. No, if there was something that had, the only reason I wouldn't say something, I take that back. There are a couple of instances where I have not divulged something because I was concerned that the site or artifact might be compromised. Because there are some things that are out there, and all it takes is one dope to destroy it because it's not protected. It's not, someplace safe. That was my concern with the Narragansett Runestone, and guess what? It got stolen. So, I've met, we've all met a lot of really wonderful people in the world. There's a lot of wonderful people in the world, but there are a few idiots, and all it takes is one to destroy something for whatever reason. And so we have gone out of our way to not talk about things to protect sites. Yes, we've done that.
Okay. Okay, so since you're not really going to talk about season 2, I have a question about one of your shows in season 2, and because I know
you can't talk about it, but we're going to talk about it. So here we go.
I mean, we're not really going to talk about it, but because I've heard through the rumor mill. I had Josh Reeves on here recently talking about the Rockwall in Rockwall, and I lived in Rockwall. I mean, I still live in the Dallas area. Yeah.
Oh, okay,
Except
cool.
I never been, I found this piece of paper. It was like this little 3-fold paper about the Rockwall, and it was like in a box somewhere. I don't even remember, and it was really old then. And I'm like, where is this? I mean, because I lived in Rockwall, and short of this one little piece of paper, there's no information about it. Unless you go online, it's kind of one little funky website. It's the most obscure, I think, really interesting mystery in Texas. And I would just, like to hear, I mean, you don't have to divulge any secrets, but just your general impression of that location. What did you think?
Well, we did do an episode on the Rockwall, and it was amazing. I mean, When I saw it, I was taken aback for sure, and I can absolutely see why it has been a mystery for as long as it has. And that was a puzzling one to investigate on some, at some levels. But there was some things that we could do to try to answer that question, and we did those things. And I think people are going to enjoy the episode. We had a few really fun guests that helped us understand and get access to the wall. And so it was a good episode. It was a lot of fun to do, and it was a beautiful area down there. The weather was really good at the time we went, and I think people are going to love that episode. I really had fun doing it, and we were able to apply some pretty interesting science to the Rockwall. And that's one of the things that I really enjoy about the show is we get an opportunity to show people some of the scientific things that we can do with rocks to try to answer some of these questions. And we were able to do something that was pretty unique with the Rockwall, and that it worked really well.
Season 2, don't miss it. So.
Gotta watch. You gotta watch.
Gotta watch it. Except you know what? I wasn't in it, and I just live like right near it. But when you come back and do a new investigation, I can just like stand in the background and wave.
Sure. Well, we have people visit us while we're shooting, but they have to take a blood oath. They can't say anything. They got to promise their firstborn and the whole thing, and but no, we do. We have people come, and I have friends that visit, and they watch, and then they snicker and laugh, and then I say, "Get out of here!" And no, we have a lot of fun. It's just great. I mean, like I said, sometimes I just go, I can't believe this is happening. This is so cool.
I'll bet.
Yeah.
Have you ever followed a lead that just ended up being a hoax?
Yep. Absolutely. And you know what? On that note, one of the things I think is noteworthy is, because of the runestone, because of Bat Creek, because of the Tucson lead artifacts, and some other artifacts that turned out to be genuine. I think there are some people out there, especially some of the more skeptical people, who think, oh, geez, well, everything Wolter looks at is real. And that's not true. Definitely not. In fact, I have let a number of people down about some things that you'll probably see show up in some of our episodes. So the funny thing about the fakes is that they usually reveal themselves pretty quickly. It's the real stuff that just keeps hanging around, like the runestone. There's one other thing that I'm not afraid to say, and I don't know too many academics that are able to do this, quite frankly. It's okay to say, I don't know. Sometimes you don't get enough evidence to draw a conclusion, and that's okay too. And I do that once in a while.
Well, I mean, I would rather have somebody say they don't have all of the evidence and they can't make a conclusion versus someone make a conclusion that's just so far out there based on nothing, and then it become dogma for the next 400 years until someone revisits it and goes, oh, that's not right.
So just a minute here. Well, no, that's exactly right. And this to me is one of the problems. And, of course, you can call me biased. I'm sure people will. But I think that's one of the reasons why in the professional world this happens less than it does in the academic world. Because, quite frankly, in some cases, I've looked at, I read what these guys write. I read as much as, I read everything I can about artifacts that, especially the ones that I've written on myself. I guarantee you I know more about the runestone than anybody walking on the planet. I know more than anybody, than maybe Hugh McCullough, about the Bat Creek stone. And certainly the lead artifacts, I can guarantee you I know more than anybody, because I've really dug into them and looked at every single resource. In fact, right now, I am helping the grandson of Thomas Bent, who wrote a book, a 360-page book, at the end of his life about the Tucson lead artifacts. It is the source document by far over anything else that exists about the Tucson lead artifacts, and it's never been published. It's in the family has, he had 12 copies made and basically gave away to family and a few friends. And that needs to be out to the world. They need to know about these, and they need that document. And when you get done reading that book, you're blown away by what happened to him and to these artifacts. You talk about incompetence.
Well, I mean,
it's just unbelievable.
I'm not even familiar. See, this is the whole thing about these things in America. I've never even heard of these Tucson lead artifacts. I mean, we have 5 minutes to break, so we have 5 minutes to talk about it.
Well, in 1924, a guy by the name of Charles Manier, World War I veteran, who was sent, had a tuberculosis, go to the southeast and, live in the warm climate. He came down to Tucson, and he was out on a Sunday drive with a couple family members, and he pulled the car over on Silver Bell Road to get out and look at some old lime kilns that were used to make mortar and plaster during the days of the buildup of Tucson. And there was a trench leading to the bottom of them that had weathered back, and he saw this piece of metal sticking out of the ground, and he tried to pull it out, but it was heavily encased in caliche, which is basically natural hard water deposits. They call it desert cement. And he had to get a crowbar to dig this thing out, and what he pulled out was a 64-pound, 2-part lead cross. Later on that night, he contacted a friend, and then Thomas Bent, who was a World War I buddy. He was also an attorney. And he said, I think that's riveted together. They popped the rivets, and they split it apart, and the two crosses were filled with Latin inscriptions dating back to the 8th and 9th centuries. Over the period of the next 4 years, they pulled out a total of 32 lead artifacts, mostly crosses, swords, and spears, ceremonial. For 2 years, the University of Arizona controlled the dig. They found 6 artifacts themselves. And everybody that was there documented everything that was done with photographs. I've seen all these hundreds of photographs. The veracity of this dig is perfect. Nobody questions that anybody did any planting. And they were buried under up to 6 feet of caliche-encrusted sand and gravel in alluvial fan deposit. These things are amazing. They have Latin, they have Hebrew, they have symbols on them that are incredible, and how they could conclude that they're fake, other than they weren't expected, they don't fit the traditional story, that's crazy. They are genuine. And when you see these, you will be amazed. They are incredible.
Well, just listening to you talk about it, I'm like, get out of town. I mean, they're in the chat room going, wow, because people don't hear about this stuff. I mean, that's the part I think is amazing, is that, something like that is found. And, our natural belief is, well, they just took it to the Smithsonian.
They can't be trusted. I don't trust them.
No. Taken to the Smithsonian and then, misfiled somehow. Never to be heard of again.
No, they're not misfiled. I've had a contentious relationship with the Smithsonian, and in all seriousness, I would love to be able to repair that. I would like to see them do what they're supposed to do. And, quite frankly, do you remember at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark?
Yeah,
we got our top people working on it, our top people. And then you see this custodian wheeling the ark in the crate into this sea of crates, never to be seen again.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. That's absolutely true.
Warehouse 13.
13. Interesting number,
I guess you haven't seen that show. Never mind.
I haven't, but anyway, I think we're all taxpayers. That stuff belongs to us. I say we should crack them open. Let's see what you got.
Well, I know the music's going to be coming up, so Scott, we need to take a quick break.
No problem.
And we'll go into the book, The Hooked X. So we're here talking to Scott Wolter about his book. All right, we haven't got there yet, The Hooked X, but we'll be back with Scott after these words from our sponsors.
Sounds
Just Energy Radio with your host, Dr. Rita Louise, will return right after these messages.
You're listening to IRN, the Inception Radio Network, Chicago, Illinois.
You didn't forget what's coming up tonight, did you? Hi, Inception Radio Network listeners. This is Amanda. Never miss that interview you were looking forward to or the show on your favorite topic. Follow IRN on Twitter, I_R_N, and get reminders about the evening's live shows as well as fun and important updates throughout the week. That's I_R_N, and never miss a great show again.
Move past the crossroads in your life and discover alternative solutions to your deepest concerns at soulhealer.com. So whether it's a physical problem, an emotional issue, a question about work, or troubles in your relationships, naturopath and medical intuitive Dr. Rita Louise can help you. Bring peace, harmony, and health back into your life. Schedule a session today. Visit soulhealer.com right away and live the life you've been dreaming of.
Hello, Inception Radio Network listeners. This is Amanda. Remember, you can take your Inception Radio shows on the go. Just download the Inception Radio Network app for your iPhone, iPad, or Android smartphones and access live shows, past shows, guest lineups, and much more. Just visit the iTunes Store or the Google Play Marketplace and download it today for free.
Who were the gods of antiquity? They've been described as the forces of nature, levels of consciousness, and aspects of our psyche. Stories that depict their incredible weapons, their flying machines, and their amazing adventures are characterized as being the product of our ancestors' fanciful imaginations. But what if the tales of the gods are true? Did the writers, chroniclers, and scribes of our distant past actually document a realistic view of our origin? My latest book, Man-Made, The Chronicles of Our Extraterrestrial Gods, looks at our most ancient legends. Learn of the torrid romances, elaborate plots, violent scandals, and conspiracies that played out in antiquity. Find out the role the gods played in the life and culture we have today. If you want to find out the truth of who we are and where we come from, order your copy of Man-Made today. For more information, go to www.manmadethechronicles.com. That's www.manmadethechronicles.com.
Hello, Inception Radio Network. Would you like your favorite show to be played again live on air? Well, now the choice is in your hands with IRN's live request portal, an easy way to request your favorite show with a simple click. IRN's live request portal now gives you exclusive access to all of the shows. How easy is it? Simply type a show name or a guest name, click request, even write a dedication message, and that's it. Try it now. Simply visit InceptionRadioNetwork.com, click on the live request tab under the show menu. Now playing your favorite show is just a mouse click away.
Go deep inside yourself and venture into the realm of the unconscious mind with my Meditating on the Kabbalah guided imagery audio CDs. Discover who you are and what you want in life. Meditating on the Kabbalah can help you to open, clear, and revitalize the energetic pathways of your subtle being. They will support you in your spiritual quest by helping you to access the profound insights and inner guidance you need as you work in alignment with your highest good. Let them help you to release negative thoughts and emotions and clear away any limitations that may be keeping you from experiencing your full potential. Walk down the path to health, healing, understanding, and enlightenment with Meditating on the Kabbalah. Order your copy today at www.soulhealer.com. That's right, that's www.soulhealer.com.
And now back to Just Energy Radio with Dr. Rita Louise.
and welcome back to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for staying tuned to the second hour of the show. Isn't Scott totally fun? Anyway, Just Energy Radio is brought to you by soulhealer.com and the Institute of Applied Energetics. That's www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com. And don't forget to stop by the Just Energy Radio webpage where you can sign up for our weekly newsletter to keep you informed of what's going inside. Or if you do happen to check out the archives on YouTube, subscribe to the channel or come here live to the Inception Radio Network every Thursday evening from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, Scott, one of the things that I feel a little guilty about, just a little tiny bit guilty about, is that you have a new book that just came out, and I didn't ever get an advance copy, so I didn't even know about it. So, I mean, we'll just have to have you come on again to talk about season 2 and this book. You know, I don't want to go into a whole lot of detail since I haven't looked at it yet. But what's the name of it, and just kind of maybe a general overview of the topic?
Sure. Well, the reason you nobody got an advance copy because it's literally only been in my hands for a week. Amazon, I just checked as we were off air here for a few minutes. Amazon doesn't even have it listed yet. So you can, it's listed, but you can't order it yet. So that means that they haven't received them yet. So it's literally just now coming out. But it's called Akhenaten to the Founding Fathers. And I'm kind of surprised at how many people go, what's an Akhenaten? And Akhenaten is, of course, an Egyptian pharaoh who was the one they called the heretic pharaoh, who changed the religion in Egypt from polytheistic dualism to monotheistic dualism. But in a really strange analogy, really what he did was he changed the religion from venerating the setting sun to venerating the rising sun. Really, that was the major difference, which is kind of ironic. But anyway, to the Founding Fathers, and essentially, and the subtitle is The Mysteries of the Hooked X. So it's really it's a continuation of the research I was doing on the Hooked X, and it just continues to take off because the Hooked X represents a number of things, not the least of which is a religious ideology that I believed the people who carved the Kensington Runestone and left many other artifacts here in this country embraced. And I believe that ideology goes back historically to at least Akhenaten, and probably much further, but certainly back to him. And I also believe that ideology continues all the way through to not just our founding fathers, but right up through this very day.
Well, and let's explore that a little further, but maybe we need to kind of backtrack one little step for the listeners. You know, we keep talking about runes and rune stones, but we really never properly defined that, you know, what that is, what a rune is. So maybe you could spend a second, you know, where do they come from or whatever.
Yeah. Well, runes are basically the characters that are used by people that are carving, using something called the alphabet called the Futhark, which is the runic alphabet, which basically goes back probably to around 400 or earlier AD, used primarily in the Scandinavian countries, all the way up through, in some parts, right into the 1800s. But the use of runes really started to fade after Christianity went through Scandinavia. But it did continue, certainly in the medieval times, in the late medieval times, in certain areas. It was the Futharks changed. The monastic orders used them extensively. The Cistercians and other monastic orders used them as part of their ways of communicating. They also took parts of runes and used them in their secret alphabets, and this gets a little bit into some of the research that I've been doing. But generally, runes were used during the Viking Age, and that's what people associate them with primarily.
Has anyone ever kind of traced back the origination, you know, not that I believe what they say that, you know, hieroglyphs developed out of cuneiform, which I can't quite figure out, you know. And so is there some kind of...
How can you say,
you know, is there some kind of progression from cuneiform or some other text into the rune stones? Because really they're kind of late on the writing scene, I would think.
Well, I first of all, let me just say I'm not the world's expert on these subject matters of the development of writing systems and different characters and different alphabets. However, I know enough to be extremely dangerous, and so I want to paraphrase it, or qualify it that way. But yes, there certainly was a progression of languages and alphabets and the use of symbols and signs and characters. Some of them changed dramatically. Some of the characters are found all the way through history, even into our alphabets today, or slightly modified. And there are people that could certainly tell you a lot more about that. But it's like anything else in life. Things evolve and they change, but yet they retain some of the old pieces or parts to them. In many cases, some more than others. So I know that's sort of a vague answer, but the answer is yes, they do evolve, they do change over time, and I think if you look at it carefully, you can see that certain alphabets evolved into, and it gets complicated because in some cases when you're talking about hieroglyphics, you're talking about a picture or an image of something that conveys a word or a concept, not necessarily a letter or a sound. So you start looking at alphabets and different symbols and glyphs, and are you talking about a one-to-one substitution with a sound, with a letter, with a concept, with an image, or is it a combination in some cases? So it gets complicated.
So,
I think I went the ditch on that one, huh?
No. No, sometimes I sit back in my chair and I just am listening, and then my mind starts following this other train of thought going, oh, yeah, well, what about this or what about that? And then it's like, oh, wait, come back.
I got to come back. Yep. No, well, you're right.
Because it just gets my mind spinning, thinking about all of this other stuff. But your book is about the hooked X. And so, I mean, obviously everybody knows what an X is, but what makes the hooked X special?
Oh, boy, that's a loaded question. A lot of things.
I'm sorry.
No, it's loaded good. It's loaded good. Well, first of all, one of the things that I've heard a lot from people is they say, the hooked X looks a lot like the Hebrew aleph symbol. And it does. And I would argue that that there might be a connection there. And I don't want to get into my new book too much, but I do go down that track of what role do the Hebrews play in all of this historically, and they play a very significant role. And it's not just the Orthodox Hebrews I'm talking about. I'm talking about a different branch of Hebrews. Anyway, so the symbol, some people think, traces back to an ancient Hebrew origin, and I think there's some possible truth to that. Where we find it on the runestone, on the Spirit Pond runestones, on the Narragansett runestone, in Columbus's sigla, in other documents, and other examples of it that are going to be introduced in my new book that were previously unknown, it's being used to represent multiple things. On one hand, with the runestone, it symbolizes the letter A or the A sound. So when you look at the words on the runestone, where there should be an A character, they use the hooked X. They don't use the classic A rune. And, this is one of the things that bothered the academics. And, what is this goofy thing? Well, we've never seen it before, so it must be wrong. Well, I don't know where they got that goofy logic. It means you haven't figured it out yet is what it means. And in the case of the runestone, what disappointed me is, look, I handed an opportunity to you. The geology, the weathering of the stone tells you that it's real. Therefore, everything in that inscription must be consistent with the 14th century. That also has to be legitimate. So get out of your chairs and go figure it out. And they didn't want to do it, so I did it. And I think I got it nailed. And what's interesting is as I started to talk about my findings, there was a certain segment of the population that approached me, and they took a strong interest in this, and it was the Freemasons. And that begged the question, why would they have an interest in this research that I was doing? Well, I now know the answer to that. And what I figured out was that the hooked X not just symbolized the letter A, but it also symbolized a concept. It symbolized a religious ideology of monotheistic dualism, the same ideology that Akhenaten was preaching. And those who followed in his footsteps. If you look at his son, King Tut, everybody's seen King Tut, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you look carefully at what he's holding across his chest,
there's the little flaily thing in the hook, right?
What does it look like?
Ooh, kind of like a hooked X?
Exactly like the hooked X. And it means the same thing. This is something that I just, it didn't necessarily fit into my brain, being more of an analytical type, but symbolism is very important, and allegory and all of this stuff. And that's not it wasn't my forte. I had to work very hard to learn that, because I knew that symbolism was a big part of what was going on with the hooked X for sure, but other parts of the runestone as well. And so I really had to work at it. And it started to make sense to me, and now I think I get it pretty good. I don't understand it all, of course, but I've got a pretty good understanding of that symbolism. And one of the arguments that I've heard people say is, well, if the runestone's a land claim, it doesn't make a claim in the name of any king or noble. So what's up with that? Well, if you are a member of a military monastic order that had been outlawed, had literally been put out of business, arrested, tortured, and burned, they were beholden to nobody beforehand, and they certainly were beholden to nobody afterwards. So why would they make this claim in honor or in the name of a king? They wouldn't. They made this claim to themselves. And I think it says who they are, emblazoned 22 times all across that darn stone in the form of the hooked X. That was their mark. That is their mark right to this day. And that's what I talk about in the new book. It's a powerful symbol that means even more than just the ideology symbology. It also speaks to who they honor and venerate. And it's pretty amazing. It's pretty powerful. And I think I got it right. And like I said, since I started talking about this, and it's pretty heavy stuff, these people have approached me and in no uncertain terms have kind of confirmed that we're onto something. Either that or we're on something. I'm not sure what it is.
Well, and I'm sitting here going, okay.
You hanging with all that?
But, well, you're saying Masons, but wouldn't it be more time to like Knights Templar versus Masons? Well,
who says there isn't a connection?
Well, I'm not saying that there isn't a connection, but, I thought the Masons was more of a contemporary group, and I'm thinking, okay, but if the stone said 1396 or whatever it said, then we're, and then you got that brain thing going. I'm going, okay, so Friday the 13th, what year? I think it was 13 something. So was that right? So that was that. It's still kind of in the ballpark that it could have been someone from that group that took off.
This you brought up a really good point, and I want to make sure that I clarify this. Okay, to all the academics who have sat there in their chairs and said, "Oh, silly Scott." By 1362, this is almost 50 years after the put down, all those Knights Templar would have been old men or dead. They couldn't possibly have been them who came to the United States. And what I say to them is, I said, look, you can kill people, but you can't kill an ideology or a belief system. That continues on, Sherlock, okay? And you have new people that come up that are indoctrinated into that ideology, and they are young, virile, strong men that could have made it over here. So don't say something stupid like that to me, okay? And I mean that, because I'm sick and tired of these nonsensical arguments that I get when I propose these ideas. Because a high school student or a really sharp middle school student can handle this concept. So, don't play stupid with me, okay? I mean, it just drives me crazy. I'm sorry. I got on my soapbox. I got a little upset. Sorry I blew up.
Yeah, we do that on this show all the time. Just don't even get me started on on healthcare.
Oh, jeez. I know you're tracking with me on that, but really, they were old men and died. They couldn't have made it. Just stop. Jeez.
Well, and there's not saying that their families didn't come and they had young children that they were raising that were brought up on this whole thing. I mean, because I would think that as a cultural group, they would have stuck together and their traditions and their stories and their legends and their language would have stayed with them until they die.
Does that happen, really?
In my fantasy world?
Come on. I mean, of course it happens. Hey, I'll raise you one better than that.
Okay.
Okay? You ready?
Okay.
Here's something I never hear anybody ever talk about. When those guys were coming over here, and the guys before that, and the people before that, and the women before that, who do you think they ran into?
Those Native Americans, they're so pesky.
No, really? Really?
Yeah.
I mean, no shit. I mean, of course they did. And years ago, I said to myself, maybe they know something. So I reached out to them. And you know what was really cool about that experience? Is that if you respect their culture and you listen and you treat them with the same way that you want to be treated, and they trust you, oh my gosh, I can tell you this, they know. Mm-hmm. Because one of the things that the Templars figured out is that they needed a place to go. They needed a place where they could practice their religious freedom. Gee, where have you heard that before? When they came over here, they understood that to get along with the natives, you needed to intermarry with them. You need to become blood brothers with them. And that's what they did. And I know that there's a lot of people out there that said, oh, this is crazy. I've never heard this before. But you know what? First of all, I believe what the natives have told me. I believe them. And I know that sooner or later, this is all going to come out. For a lot of reasons, it will come out. And you know why we're going to find out about it? And why the truth will be told no matter what anybody says? They cannot stop it. You know why?
Why?
It's very simple. It's in the blood.
See, I knew you were going to say that.
It's true, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, isn't there a group of Native Americans that show distinctly Jewish blood, genetic characteristics that they're like, where did they come from?
Yep. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, my friend, because I've seen some of the results. I can't talk about it, but look.
It's in season 2, right?
Well, no, this is real life. This is real life. And I mean, if you stop and think about it, it's just like winter's coming. Nothing you can do about it. It will be here. It's going to be cold, and we're going to freeze. But no, I mean, seriously, the way science is going, And this is the thing that's changing the game right now. And it's been happening, and it's going to continue to happen. Things like the internet and cell phones, instant communication. Back in the past, an academic could sit on something and take years to write a paper and then go through this nonsensical review process where his buddies sign off on it. And then it becomes truth. And by the time somebody wants to argue, they're all dead. That's really the way it used to be. But now it's like, boom. And you can get information literally minutes after it happens, seconds after it happens. And this is changing our world at a pace that we don't even understand right now. And that's what's so great about this. I can do this research and I can find anything I want just with a click of a button. And our whole world is changing. And I think in the long run it will be for the better. Because I think anybody that's living on this planet right now knows that we've got some serious problems. Not the least of which is the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about, certainly no politician will ever talk about, and that's the population. We got 7 billion people on this planet, and we can't keep going in this direction. We all know it, but nobody wants to talk about it. But we need to talk about it. We have to talk about it. And I think we should do it before it gets any worse. But these are the kind of things that have to be fixed if we want to make it long-term on this planet. And I believe it starts by knowing the truth, the truth about our history, and that's really where it begins. Because once we know what that is, then we can make intelligent choices going in the future. And that's part of what the show is all about. That's really what one of the core goals I have is. Because I want a world that my kids and my grandkids and great-grandkids and the ones that I'll never meet, I want them to be around here and talk about what a horse's you-know-what I was. And I'm joking, of course, but I'm not joking. I really want the world to be a better place than we left it. And I see this as that incredible opportunity to do that. And exposing these mysteries and trying to get to the bottom of whatever it is we're looking at is something I can do about that.
Well, we're so brainwashed, but let's get back out of politics before we both say something we don't want to.
I think I already did.
No, it wasn't that
bad. I meant every word I said. I really do.
But there was another question from the chat room, and kind of going back to the tribes or the Native Americans that you talked to, and this is from Kat, and she wants to know what tribes did you talk to that you did get some information about these potentially white settlers in, I'll assume, the Minnesota area.
Well, no, actually, I have talked to some people here. The Ojibwa, specifically, people from the Algonquin Nation up in Canada. I've talked with Mi'kmaq, which is, we call them the Micmac. They call themselves the Mi'kmaq. Cherokee, many people in the Cherokee tribes, the Creek Indians, Assiniboine, a number of tribes, elders and story keepers, prophecy keepers, people that are part of the Native American secret societies. They have their own secret society. Most people don't know that. And much like other cultures around the world, they select the brightest in their culture to be educated, to become, I guess you would call it the equivalent of the doctors, the lawyers, the engineers, the architects, the geologists. And they go through a very rigorous teaching and training and rituals, and they learn amazing things. And some of them are selected to keep track of their stories, of their history. And they're very good at keeping track of their history, but of course, we don't know about that as white people because, look what we did. Hey, Janet, where's that other phone? This one's about to die. Downstairs? Upstairs. Hold on. So, anyway, hopefully I can... Yeah, here's the other phone. Sorry about that.
He's marathoning.
There we go. Got it. Yeah. So I talk about this in my new book.
Okay. Well then, shh. We'll save it for the next
no, it's all right. It's all right.
Well, I have more questions, and we're running out of time.
All right. I'll shut up. Go ahead.
Okay. Back to the hooked X. I mean, because I think it's just a really interesting concept. I mean, because one of the things I'm working on a project looking at the spread of art and iconography. There's a new project I'm working on. And and it seems like in reading your book that this concept or the image of the hooked X extends further than just this Kensington Runestone, but that it is kind of found in a lot of different places. And you mentioned in Egypt, but what are some other places that you have found it? And has it been primarily with runestones, or is it really a much larger base of iconography?
Well, the other places I found it really span. Starting in Egypt, the main examples I found really start the hooked X as you see it on the runestone. That symbol starts about 1100 and goes. I can find examples in pretty much every century right up through today. There are documents. There's something called the Copiel cipher. Have you heard of that? It was decoded by a group of academics last year. It's a 300 and something year old manuscript that was European manuscript from Germany that was unknown. People didn't know what it was, and it was eventually deciphered as basically a Masonic document. And in it has all these coded characters, one of them being there were seven or eight larger characters that were twice as big as the characters in the main body of the text. One of those was a hooked X. And the researchers called it Big X. But it's being used to represent a rival Masonic order. And that was a huge clue that told us that it was representative of a group that embraced a particular ideology. That was my thesis. And then they came out with this. That hooked X in that document is consistent with that. Columbus's sigla, he's got it in there. There are some other documents that I can't talk about right now that have the hooked X in them that are consistent with the premise. I know we've got it right. The more evidence that we can bring forward, the stronger the case. But I don't think anybody's going to be able to effectively argue that that's not what it means. And, who knew about that in the late 1800s that would have put it on the Kensington Runestone and used it the way they did? I mean, it's such a complex document. There's so much going on. The fact that we have to, I have to be honest with you, when I talk about the runestone, I forget that there's still people out there that don't think it's real. I'm so far past it. It's like, oh yeah, that's right.
I just had a conversation with somebody yesterday. I was telling them, I have you coming on the show. We're talking about the Kensington Runestone, and they pretty much, they didn't pretty much, they laughed in my face. And it was like,
well, you know what?
Obviously you're not a fan of my show. Oh, no.
Well, I you know what I say to them? I go, well, okay, what basis do you have to say that? Well, so and so, everybody says. Really? Yeah. Oh, that's great. Try arguing that in a court of law.
Yeah,
what do you are you just accepting what everybody told you? Have you looked at it yourself? Do you know what you're even talking about? No, of course they don't. They just accepted what they've been told because they consider the source to be credible. And that's why this whole thing keeps persisting. But the fact of the matter is, on the subject of the Kensington Runestone, I don't care if you're talking about Albert Einstein. If he doesn't know what he's talking about, he's not credible. And these people just don't know what they're talking about. They laughed in your face. Well, guess what? The joke is on him because he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Well,
and
I just
welcome anybody.
The source.
I welcome anyone to bring forth evidence to argue against it. Bring it on. But don't tell me what you think, okay? Because I don't care. And that sure isn't going to pass as evidence in a court of law. unless you have a basis for what you think. And if all you're doing is telling me what you think without a basis, I'm not interested.
You
Done.
tell him, Scott.
Well, hey, at what point do we have to listen to any more of this nonsense? At some point, you just have to say, look, with all due respect, if you don't have evidence, move on and bring on the next one. I guarantee you, I tell you what, Rita, if I guarantee you right now, okay, and I've put this challenge out in public many times, I challenge anyone, to a mock trial on the Kensington Runestone, okay? I'll come forth with my evidence, and somebody on the other side, you come forth with your evidence, and let's have a mock trial in front of our peers. I'll tell you right now, if they have a lawyer representing them, they won't even show up. You know why they won't show up?
Because they don't have any evidence?
Exactly. And how can they? Because think about this. This is the other thing that people don't understand about forensics, which is what I've been doing for over 30 years, every day of my life. If the runestone is genuine, and there's a body of factual evidence in multiple disciplines, which there is, that are consistent with authenticity, and therefore it is genuine, how can there possibly be factual evidence to support the contrary?
I mean, the argument that I tend to hear from people is, well, you know, it doesn't have a stamp on it that says made in China, or there's not some other document that says, you know, on April 15th, 1340, this Kensington runestone was buried at this location in Kensington, Minnesota, you know, or whatever. And it's like, okay, but they can't produce. I mean, it's kind of like it almost becomes a he said, she said in some instances, maybe not this situation of there's not any evidence, and it's the best that you can get from analyzing what you have and comparing it to what you can find in other situations versus it's fake.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. Do you think that a case can be made to convict a person of murder based solely on a dead body?
No.
Well,
I mean, you know, a dead body.
You're wrong about that. It's happened many times. If a person's blood is found on a murder victim, say under their nails, I mean, there's all kinds of scenarios. The runestone has all kinds of factual evidence that tells you exactly what it is. The problem is people refuse to listen to it. They don't know how to do it. They don't know how to do a forensic investigation properly. That's one of the things I talk about in my runestone book. Is I went back and looked at the investigation, the past investigations, and they were all screwed up. From start to finish, they were messed up. And I can show, and I present that. The chapter's called Scandals in Scholarship. And really, the fundamental problem with not just the runestone, but many of these artifacts that don't fit the historical paradigm, is that the people that did the investigations or did the research did it wrong. They didn't follow proper scientific method. And the archaeologists hate when I say this, and the historians hate when I say this, but it's true. Those disciplines fall in the humanities, which are wonderful fields, but they are not properly trained in scientific method. They don't know how to do it. They think they do, but they don't. They're not trained as scientists. That's the fact. And it bugs the crap out of them, but it's the truth. And the evidence is all over these artifacts and the history behind them of flawed investigations. And if there's anybody in the world that understands how to do a proper investigation, it's me. That's what I do. And so I really do understand the process. And much of it boils down to simple logic. Logic will absolutely set you free and will solve the problem for you if you use it. And it was one of the best classes I ever had in college. It was logic class. And you use that with proper scientific method, you can do some amazing things.
If you have somebody that wants to hear it. I mean, it just seems like we have been so stuck in a brainwashed state of this is the timeline of humanity and this is the history of what happened on this planet. It doesn't sound like you watch TV that much, but they had a series called, but it was on History Channel, Mankind, the History of All of Us. Now, I personally had to watch it so I could kind of talk back to the TV set, and it was the most ridiculous recording of our history. It was, the history of all of us if you're a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant man living in America, but not really all of us.
That's the demographic they're trying to hit, right? They're the ones with the money, right?
And it's like, God, what a giant propaganda piece. I'm like, who are they trying to convince? Well,
yeah. Well, you're right about that, and you're right about the fact I don't watch a lot of TV. I'm doing my when I'm not doing the show or doing work, I'm researching, and yeah, I mean this is part of the problem. But it's like you said, they don't want to hear it. Well, tough hop, and quite frankly, shut your mouth when it comes to rendering your opinion about the runestone if you don't know what you're talking about. If you're not informed, if you don't understand, then just butt out. You're not helping the situation. And this is what I see time and time again, people that think they know something and that their opinion matters, but they don't have anything to contribute. I just get bored.
That's because they're not on TV.
Well, look, I said this before I was on TV. I guarantee you, my friends will tell you, I've been talking like this for 12 years.
No, I'm talking about the academics. Although they did have Zahi on TV, but I kind of like him because he's Zahi Hawass.
I don't know who that is.
Zahi Hawass, Egypt.
Oh, Zahi Hawass?
He just makes me laugh. I like him because he makes me laugh and just who he is in general.
Yeah, he's something else, isn't he? He reminds me of my old football coach from college, man. He was in your face and he was in your grill. But you know what? My coach was the toughest guy I ever met, and he was he was tough. But after practice or after the game, he'd do anything for you. I remember the first year, he was on me so bad. And I realized later the reason he was on me is because I had some potential. If he didn't talk to you, that's a problem. If he didn't give you attention. But after practice, he'd come up, he'd say, "Hey, Scotty, how's it going? Is there anything I can do for you?" I go, "You the same guy?" That's kind of the way Hawass is. I think you get him alone, and he's probably not a bad guy.
No, I mean, I think, as long as you do whatever he tells you to do in the correct and proper way, that you'd get along with him just fine.
Well, that's the way coaches are. Let me tell you, you do it my way or the highway.
Okay, so let me ask one last question about the runic inscriptions because we're almost out of time.
Okay.
All right, so there's the Kensington Runestone, and this is, I'm asking about the United States. Have there been other runes found in the United States? And if so, are they in one area of the country versus another?
There have been, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, at least a dozen that I know of. There's a few that the world don't know about yet, and they're found. Most of them are found on the northeast coast, but they're really spread out pretty much all across the country. I mean, the Hebner Stone's down in Oklahoma. The Independence Stone is in Missouri. The Mustang Mountain from season 1 was in Arizona. Minnesota with the runestone. The Spirit Ponds are in Maine. The No Man's Land Island runestones in Massachusetts, off Martha's Vineyard. The Narragansett Stone is in Rhode Island. There's some in Canada. There's a couple others I can't talk about, but you'll hear about them in due time. Yeah, these guys got around.
what I think is kind of interesting is that there's not a, that we've heard of a mythic law. Well, I guess maybe you were kind of alluding to that, with the Native Americans, or that more of Christianity or monotheism or, the philosophy of the Knights Templar didn't wear off on the native population.
Who said it didn't?
I don't know. Me?
Let's put it this way. Their ideology was very compatible. And it certainly wasn't Roman Christian. And hence the problem with both groups. And so when they got together, they have, when the Templars came over here and intermarried with their native brothers, you think they didn't tell them about what was going on over on the other side of the pond? You think they didn't warn them that the Christians were coming and that it wasn't going to be good? And of course they did. And the natives knew they were coming. And it wasn't good. You know what's interesting? You've heard of Cahokia, right?
Maybe.
You have too. Seriously? Okay. Well, I won't.
All right, talk about it, and then maybe. I don't know.
Well, Cahokia was a huge native city just outside of St. Louis. Did you know that there is an earthen pyramid at Cahokia, flat-top earthen pyramid, that has a base footprint that's bigger than the Great Pyramid of Giza, right here just outside of St. Louis? You didn't know that?
Well, I maybe did.
Well, I'm teasing you a little bit.
I don't know. Not that was coming to the forefront of my mind. No, but again, it's all of these things. But it's all of these things that like apparently there. I live in Texas, and apparently there are mounds in East Texas. And it's like I only heard about those this year. I'm like, really? Yeah.
The mounds that exist in this country, the pyramids, the effigy mounds, oh man, there's so much going on here, and this is part of the native history, which is immensely complicated. But let me just throw this little fun fact out to you. Around 1300 or so, Cahokia, which was a city of over 50,000 people, natives, one of many cities here in North America, was suddenly abandoned. And the archaeologists have no clue as to why they abandoned their cities. Some of the things that have been proposed are, well, the natives overhunted and overfished, cut down all the trees. They were stupid. Now, I don't believe that. I don't think you believe that. Mm-mm. So why did they leave? Well, one of the things I was told is that the Templars warned them they were coming. They had a prophecy that they had to abandon their cities and go wild if they would have any chance to survive. That's pretty interesting.
It is.
It's pretty provocative, but it makes a lot of sense. I've run this by a couple archaeologists, and of course they scoff. But you know what I say to them? Well, prove me wrong. Prove them wrong. Just because you didn't think of it or you never thought of it before doesn't mean that it's wrong. It actually makes a lot of sense and it fits. That doesn't prove it. That's not enough to prove it. I'll be the first to admit that. But it's an awful good working hypothesis, isn't it?
But there's a lot of stuff that happens up in that area. Like we just did a show on Serpent Mound in Ohio, which is another amazing site that you sort of maybe hear about, but not so much. And they talk about
season 2.
Boy, season 2 is going to be great. And you don't have to talk about it. I'm just going to, but one of the things that I learned, which I had absolutely no idea, was, there's the serpent image, but then there's this whole huge complex around it, which nobody talks about.
Right. And did you know that the Serpent Mound is located on the southwest rim of a 5-mile diameter impact crater.
But see, that's one of the cool things that I learned.
You did learn that.
I did, because they have this like weird magnetic anomaly thing going on there. And
Yep. That's right. And I want to be careful. I don't want to share too much, but the Serpent Mound I have visited a couple of times, and it's one of the coolest places I've been on this continent.
Well, see, now everybody, not that Scott's telling you all of the upcoming episodes on season 2, but we know what most of them are going to be about, so you're just going to have to watch. I mean, not that you know any details.
Well, we want to tease, but we don't want to give away too much. We want people to watch, and I think they're really going to enjoy it. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes, we have an episode that I kind of go, I don't know if that's going to be that great. And then we get into it, and I'm amazed. Things happen that I didn't expect. I learned things that I didn't realize, and they're always better than even I expected. I can't say that there was any episodes that we've done so far where I was disappointed in anything. They were all great in their own ways. I mean, some I like better, certainly, but they're all good. They really are.
And season 2 starts in November, correct?
Yeah, sometime around Thanksgiving, but we don't have a hard date yet. But boy, as soon as we do, I'm going to tell everyone.
Well, okay, because they're asking in the chat room.
Yeah, and I just don't know. I wish I could tell you.
Okay, but it's going to be on on the H2 channel.
Yes,
History 2.
The new shows will be only on the H2 channel. Yep.
Okay. So what else is coming up for you? It's like you're just having another new book released as we speak. It's being shipped hot off the press to Amazon.com so that people can buy it.
Yeah.
And what's the name of that book again?
Akhenaten to the Founding Fathers, The Mysteries of the Hooked X.
And so now that you're done with that and you can have like a 5-second breather, but what's coming up after that? Because it sounds like you constantly have projects going on.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's a couple of projects that I'm kicking around in my head right now. But actually, one of my good friends and a brilliant researcher who appeared in a couple of episodes in season 1, Alan Butler, who's written about 20 books, is actually working on a book with my wife right now. And I'm kind of helping them a little bit, but they don't need my help, quite frankly. So that is kind of dovetails a little bit with some of the research that I've done, but it is different. So that's an upcoming project. And then another thing I'm kicking around here is maybe doing a book, and I probably will do it at some point, about the first state geologist of Minnesota, a guy who traveled with General George Custer, was the first one to map the Black Hills with Custer, and this is how smart this guy was. The last trip he took with Custer was the one before the Little Bighorn. He was not at the Little Bighorn. I mean, that's how smart that guy was. But he was also the guy, the first geologist to study the Kensington Runestone. And what's so funny is there are many people out there that are saying, "Oh, Scott, you saw the Kensington Runestone," and and I go, "No, I didn't. All I've done is replicate what Newton Winchell did back in 1909, 1910. He solved the Kensington Runestone. He was the first one to come out and say it was absolutely genuine, and he was a hard scientist, a geologist in this case. And what's interesting is the geologists are all saying the same thing. We all say it's genuine, because we listen to the rock. The rock doesn't care. The rock doesn't have an ego or an agenda. It just is. It's reliable. And so I'd like to do a book on him, because he did some incredible work, not just on the runestone, but on many other things. He was also an archaeologist. He wrote the definitive volume on the Native Americans in Minnesota called The Aborigines of Minnesota. He was actually recruited to finish that book after J.V. Brower died on a dig in 1905. That book was published in 1911, and it's incredible. So he was really an amazing guy, and I'd like to write his biography. No one's ever done it.
That would be very cool. A little bit different from what you're working on, but parallel.
Similar, but not the same.
Right. But, it keeps things interesting and well-rounded and moving forward. So,
well, I think like a lot of people who write, they want to share things that they think are cool, and I mean, I think all the stuff I've been writing about in Hooked X books are fascinating, and a lot of people seem to agree, and I think Winchell's work was amazing. He's one of the, founding fathers of Minnesota, one of the giants of our community, and I think when people hear about it and read about him, I think they'll think he was a pretty cool guy. So,
well, and somebody that was willing to go against the status quo, because they had Columbus back then too.
Well, he didn't worry about that kind of stuff. That's not what it's about. I don't worry about that stuff. I just go where the evidence takes me. And, if you feel you have enough evidence to say something, then speak up. That's what I'm paid to do. And so we go through the process, we compile the evidence, and we draw a conclusion if we have enough evidence. And in most cases, we do. So it works out pretty good.
Works out good. Hey, Scott, our time is up. So if people, I know, but you're going to come back like maybe halfway through season 2 so we can get caught up on episodes. Then I can ask you all the questions that you had to take the 5th for and, talk about your new book. Yeah, that's coming out today or this, currently. And it'll be good.
No, that'd be wonderful. I appreciate your having me on. I really do. This is great for me to be able to help spread the word because, like I said, it's about getting the word out. It's a marketing campaign now, and I'm fortunate to have this opportunity. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
No, you're totally welcome. And I'm assuming Amazon, well, you said Amazon, if people want to get the books, Hooked X, and say the name of the new one again. I should write it down, but that would be
okay. Well, and if they want to get a signed copy, they can go to my website, which is www.hookedx.com, HOOKEDX.com. Otherwise, you can get it on Amazon. It doesn't matter. Same price. And no, actually, I think Amazon's probably cheaper, but you can't get a signed copy.
You can't get signed there. That's right.
Yep, it's Akhenaten to the Founding Fathers, The Mysteries of the Hooked X.
Perfect. All right, Scott, I am going to let you go, and I will get in touch with you or your peeps, and we'll figure out a different date.
Sounds great. Thanks again for having me. It was a lot of fun.
All right. Thank you. All right.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
That's Scott Wolter. His webpage is hookedx.com. And don't miss season 2, America Unearthed, because it sounds freaking amazing. But next week, here on Just Energy Radio, we have a very cool show coming up. It's a girl power show. In the first hour, we have Barbara Hand-Clow coming on. And the second hour, we have Denise Link coming on talking about the secret alchemy of food. So until next week, I'm Dr. Rita Louise. This is Just Energy Radio. Be blessed.
Join host Dr. Rita Louise each week at this time for Just Energy Radio.